Talk is a podcast featuring active service members who discuss their thoughts and opinions on various issues surrounding military life, current events, and history. The statements heard here are the opinions of its members and guests. These do not necessarily reflect the views of Department of Defense and are not endorsed or sponsored in any way. Listener, viewer discretion advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Pit Talk, Pulling Pits and Opinions with your host, Gunny G. We're back after a week break. We got a special guest today. Before we get there, though, follow, like, subscribe everywhere you get your podcasts and on social media platforms. Not so much TikTok because that's a hard one to peel back, I'll tell you that. But if you don't, please leave a comment, DM me, criticize, don't criticize. Let me know how I'm doing. Constructive criticism is good criticism. Today we have a special guest. I call him Chaplain Redmon, but he's going to introduce himself, a little bit about yourself, sir. Background, billets, how long you've been in, things of that nature.
Yeah. I think special is the right word. I'm special in a lot of ways, but I appreciate that. Background, I'm from hot Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm an AT alien. Outcast, all the old school Atlanta stuff.
That's good.
But came in through the chaplain candidate pipeline 2008. Went through graduate school, got a master's divinity in 2011, and then spent a couple years doing clinical pastoral education at the Veterans Affairs Hospital in Atlanta. And then I moved on to St. Joseph's, did my residency at a Catholic hospital, spending all my time in the cardiopulmonary wing, the emergency room, oncology. Got to do a lot of good things in that regard. And it really prepared me for Navy chaplaincy. And I applied for active duty in 2012 and came on board in 2013. Ended up here in Bremerton at the hospital. So I asked not to be in hospitals and be on the East Coast. They sent me to Washington to a hospital. It's kind of how the Navy works, but it's probably the best build of my career. I met a lot of good friends there, and here I am back in Washington now. I begged to come back here. But in between that time period, I went down to San Diego. I was with 3rd MAW, the Marine Air Wing there, deployed with the 11th MEU for about 11 months or so. I was the aviation combat element chaplain, and then I moved on to Mayport, Florida, where I served the Paul Ignatius and the USS Roosevelt. A couple deployments in there, one during COVID, and then I moved on to Goose Creek, South Carolina, and I spent some time with the nukes in what they call Nuclear Power Training Unit, the final phase of their training pipeline. And I got to see kind of the academic rigors they go through and the hardships they go through. And then God blessed me with Marine Corps Security Force Battalion Bangor. Blessed to be back in the Pacific Northwest and with the Marines, which is a really unique thing. Not a lot of Marines up here, and the mission set's unique too. So it's a good place to be.
So it sounds like overall pretty good so far, huh?
Yeah.
Nothing to really complain about, but what we've talked about previous, right? But
yeah,
that's not part of this discussion.
Complaints. Just mission accomplishment. That's
good. That's good. So the reason why I got you on, sir, if I may,
don't give me a complex.
Is the spiritual warfighter? They call it moral fitness, right? But I think of it as spirituality. Yeah. Really, who defines us as the mind, body, soul kind of thing, or physical, mental, and what's the other one? Warfighter type of aspect. Can't think of the last one, but
spiritual.
Spiritual. There it is. Yeah. What to you? I know I'm sure there's a Bible definition or a book definition, publication definition, whatever it is that you're looking for.
Yeah.
But for you, what is the spiritual warfighter?
I would say spiritual warfighter is somebody who can accomplish the mission, and execute and stay in the fight without losing themselves. Believing in something greater than themselves. So when they're in the stuff or they're in the fight, they're not losing focus of who they are. They know who they are. They're relying upon who they are, and it gets them through the fight so that they can process what happens during the fight after the fact. They're not trying to figure out who they are during general quarters or in combat or when the proverbial stuff hits the fan. They know who they are.
That's good. That's good. Kind of rolls into the next question. There's obviously challenges with military, and I think that you can touch on Navy and Marine Corps. I'm sure you could touch across the board in all branches, but does having a solid, found spiritual life help, or is it really put on the back burner when you're serving?
That's a hard question. Does it help? I'm a chaplain. You know how I'm going to answer that. Yeah, I think it absolutely helps. Have people gotten through that process without a spiritual backing? Yeah, but that's where they're at more risk for PTSD and moral injury and things like that. So having, something you believe in, faith, or even a philosophy of life, something greater than you to believe in, that's going to put you at less risk for spiritual injury or moral injury is what we call it now, or PTSD.
Interesting. So that goes in kind of ties into my next question. Spiritual beliefs provide us strength and resilience, right? What exactly, if you can point something right now for the service members listening, what is that it does? Like, I'm sure there's, in talking with you weekly, right, there's a lot of things that go on, but just provide one little tidbit of insight for people listening right now in terms of resilience and strength when they're dealing with stress.
Yeah, I mean, so we kind of talked about this before we started the podcast, like how hard the job can be in the military, how hard the lifestyle can be. Believing in something greater than you, and for you and I, it's the Christian faith, right? Believing in Jesus. Everything we do in this job, it's not for the Marine Corps, it's not for the Navy, it's for a purpose much greater. And there's a lot of things we'll be asked to do, or maybe we're treated less than desirable at times, but we're still expected to do our job for people who may not earn our respect or our trust. I think when in terms of spirituality, because you're doing it for a purpose much higher than the institution or the individual asking you to do it, it allows you to always accomplish that mission with dignity and with faith and with a belief that there will be a good outcome at some point in time. So you always have that backing. There's something more to what you're doing than just doing it because you're ordered to do it.
That's good. You kind of. I'm going to take that whole thing in its disregard. And you said one little thing of it was, it's not very appealing, right? Not the correct word verbatim, but you said it's not appealing to maybe people watching us or, watching what we do. Why is it, do you think, POV hashtag, right? Personal view is, do you think that it is kind of looked differently, or people look at you differently because you put your spirituality at the forefront in terms of service? And is there a negative connotation in terms of, if we do that, we could happen, or this could happen?
Are you talking about as far as like how fellow service members look at us for being spiritual? Yeah, I think a lot of people do look at it as like this antiquated thing, like spirituality is not relevant anymore. And I think that happens a lot in kind of the peacetime part of what we do as well. When combat's happening and there's war happening and people are dying and there's casualties, I think people are less likely to look at it that way. And in fact, I think the Marines are the ones that created the old adage, there's no atheists in foxholes. So, yeah, I mean, do people look at it weird and differently? It depends on the service member and where they come from, how they were raised, and what they were raised to believe. But I think it just depends on the service member and how they look at spirituality and faith.
That's good. That's good. If you're not listening, listen up. We got Chaps Redmon. You didn't share your first name, by the way, for the listeners.
Shawn.
Shawn. Oh, that's solid.
SHAW, and it's the right way to spell it. So.
That's
not like Doc Hauschkins. He's SEAN. So
Yeah.
We have a debate about who's right and who's wrong.
Well, if you're asking my opinion, I'm a little biased. I'm a little biased, chaps. How can practicing mindfulness and meditation, spiritual mindfulness and spiritual meditation, make us better service members? You touched on it a little bit, but let's go into depth more.
Yeah, so for me, they're all kind of connected. Jesus taught us how to pray the Lord's Prayer. He said, go into that closet, that quiet place, and this is how you should pray. But it could also be, in times you would see Jesus go out into the wilderness. He needed to get away from his mission, from the people, to be with God, to go find himself. So I think a lot of it's going into the wilderness, finding that quiet place. Maybe it is a closet for you. Maybe it's the trails, the woods. And meditating for us as Christians is prayer, but maybe for some people it's yoga. For me, running, I'm one of those, Forrest Gump types. I just like to run, right? So meditation, running is a form of meditation for me. It's my mind, my body, and my soul working in unison, where they all become one. It happens more in running a lot of times than it does in church. So for a lot of these guys, I try to teach them what warrior toughness teaches. That's a kind of a course the Navy's become big on, and preparation's a big part of that. And in that preparation phase is meditation, or prayer, or mindfulness. Being able to envision what that mission is going to be, walk yourself through it mentally, and try to smell the smells, see the things, hear the things. Maybe have somebody with more wisdom than you walk you through it, and mindfully prepare yourself for what is this thing going to be like? How am I going to react to it? How am I going to get through it? So I think it's religious in a lot of ways, but it doesn't have to be either.
That's good. That's good. So I know that you touched a little bit about deployments. How does having a strong foundation contribute to a good deployment for a service member, right? Do we do enough prep spiritually before we do the workup, before we go on the MEU, before we go forward deployed? Or is there not enough? Do you think that we should do more?
Like as a institution?
As an institution, yes.
I think we do a lot to prepare. I wouldn't necessarily call it spiritual in nature, but there's a lot of things to prepare for deployment. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you think about like just the exercises or the workups, that's preparing the warfighter. It's a form of mindfulness. Is what they're doing is they're teaching muscle memory. But does that happen from a spiritual or religious place? A lot of times, it's kind of left up to the individual. So for me as a chaplain, I help prepare a lot of people for that, but it's only when they need me to do that for them. I don't know that there's a program per se to get them spiritually ready. Although the Navy is working on those things like warrior toughness and programs like that, which involves the mind, the body, and the soul, which General Mattis was big on that part, the spiritual side of who we are too. Yeah.
So do you think, in your opinion, they should do more? This is a personal opinion. Do you think that should be part of the PTP's workups for Marines and sailors that go forward deployed? Is that, I correlate to, when you're in San Diego as a drone instructor, you have a week of prep, right? You do all Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of prep, administrative prep, SOP prep, RTO prep, whatever it is that they're doing. So get them prepared for that weekend. Spirituality is not one of them, I'll tell you that, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think we should do more? Just be very transparent.
Yeah.
So I think
that's a loaded question, but yeah, as a chaplain, absolutely. I mean, if I were to say no, what kind of chaplain would I be?
Or do we do enough? Right? That's a better answer too. That's a better question too. Do we do enough?
That gets into what you perceive as being enough. Mm-hmm. I think some people say yes, we do, but could we improve it? Absolutely. There's definitely ways that we could get people more prepared spiritually, but it also takes individuals willing to go through that. So I think it comes down to the service members asking for it too, to ask for more spiritual readiness. But that is a big push in the chaplain corps right now, spiritual readiness and how can we prepare the warfighter for what's to come. with all the things on the horizon.
That's good. So that goes kind of, can spiritual beliefs provide comfort in terms of when they face injury, loss, trauma in the line of duty? You're talking about the Navy preparing. Well, can you maybe name some of the things that they're trying to include or trying to incorporate with our training?
Yeah, so warrior toughness is a big one. We've had a lot of what we call professional development training courses on things like moral injury. In fact, a couple Saturdays ago, there's a guy, Dr. Harold Koenig, out of Duke University, who's worked hand in hand with the Navy Chaplain Corps on developing these programs. So I had an 8-hour course on moral injury and how that ties into PTSD and how spirituality affects those things. Not necessarily religion, but spirituality, believing in something greater than yourself. And I think that one of the statistics he's found through his studies is people, when it comes to suicide, which is a big problem for us in the military right now. It's one of the biggest things we're dealing with. It's a different kind of war that we're fighting. That service members are 80% less likely, and that may not be the exact number, but it's close, 80% less likely to suicide when they believe in a religion or something greater than themselves. Most likely a religion. Because of the morals and values that are instilled in that person, as opposed to someone who's not sure what they believe or may not believe in anything at all.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not privy to what happens, post-service, obviously, right?
Yeah.
For obvious reasons, but and you said you've worked with some.
Oh, yeah. I was at the VA for about 10 months for an internship.
Okay, so did you see a lot of, what did you do in that capacity to help service members spiritually so that they can come from that?
So a lot of it's ministry of presence, just being with that person as they talk about what their injuries are. And for a lot of veterans, they rarely talk about what happened to them with their families or with anybody. And for a lot of veterans I sat with, they were at the end of their lives. These were World War II veterans. This was probably 2009, 2010. So there's still a lot of the World War II veterans were sick and dying at that point. Vietnam veterans, Korean War veterans. There were some OEF, OIF guys in there that had never shared any of their injuries, their spiritual injuries, with anyone. So a lot of what I would do as a chaplain was just listen to them and allow them to kind of get the emotional infection out so that they could begin to heal again. And if you think about that in terms of what Jesus did, a lot of what he did is he listened, or he was there with people. And then he moved forth with, repentance and things like that.
That's good. How, what were the first, second line, third of, rephrase that question. What were the initial impacts for those service members? Like, did they come from, or were they like, okay, remorseful? Hey, it's time. There's some conviction there. Like I gotta reroute, so to speak. Yeah,
a lot of tears shed, and some of those guys probably had never cried in front of anybody before. But they were able to kind of release the pain, and we worked on things like forgiveness and repentance. Repentance not being begging for God's forgiveness or mercy or grace. Repentance being changing the way they thought about themselves, or the way they looked back upon these things they had to do or that were done to them. And then the forgiveness part, how can you forgive yourself so that you can believe that God also forgives you and that you can forgive others? They realized a lot of it was more about their inner struggles than all these external things they thought it was about.
This one I have to read because it's a good one, right? So, Can a strong sense of spiritual identity and purpose help military warfighters maintain their sense of humanity during dehumanizing aspects of warfighting and warfare?
Can you read that one more time? That's a lot. That's a lot.
So there's the spiritual identity, right?
Yeah.
And then there's warfighting. And sometimes there's things that we do or service members do that's dehumanizing.
Sure.
During warfighting. If you're prepared spiritually and you have a spiritual identity, how does that help prevent those dehumanizing situations during warfare?
I don't know that it can prevent anything that happens out there. In fact, to have a strong sense of religion and moral value, a lot of times those wounds can be deeper.
Ooh.
When you transgress your morals, that's where shame is. You violate part of who you are. And sometimes those things, they're orders. They're things they have to do, or things happen out of happenstance or out of, the randomness of life. If you use the example of a service member who kills a civilian, not meaning to, but it was part of what their order was or what their mission was, an explosion or, a misfire or something like that. How do they make sense out of that? And that deep injury they have because their religion says thou shalt not kill. What happens there is they're able to look at it through the lens of that. Yes, I cross that moral or that value I have in place, but there's also forgiveness. There's also grace. There's also mercy. I can't really take away what happened. I can't change that. But what I can change is how I respond to this thing that happened to me or that I did to someone else. It doesn't have to define me. It doesn't have to destroy me. I can look at it in such a way that I can kind of harness my emotions and work on how can I forgive myself? How can I live with this? How can I move on and live in spite of those things?
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good. I have to whisper that.
I'm still trying to figure those things out for myself. So.
Can you give some personal background in terms of what you just said here? Like, hey, this is, I can't change the outcome of war, but I can definitely do this and do that.
Yeah. So,
but some personal relatability to that statement.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all have things from the past in our lives, things that have happened to us or things we've done, mistakes we've made. People, I don't think any of us can say we've never hurt anybody. But all that's in the past. Unless you can, I mean, maybe you have something I don't have. Can you go back to the past and change anything that happened to you or that you've done? Do you have the ability to do that?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, nope, I can't.
Okay, I was hoping you did. That way I could get you to help me.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, none of us have that ability. But how much time and energy do we spend on trying to do that? Going back to those things, right? Going back to these people that have hurt us or these events we've done that have transgressed who we are. Instead, we can take that time and energy, invest it into how can we heal from that? How can we move on from that? And how can we change? How can we move on in a better direction in life and heal and help repair those things if we can? If we can't, how do we leave it where it is? How do we process it? And how do we move on? I think that's true forgiveness, being able to move on and be a good person in spite of those things that have happened, kind of letting yourself out of the prison, so to speak.
That's good.
Yeah.
How does serving a higher power or, that kind of thing correlate with service in terms of being in the service? And do they mix and match kind of thing? Or is it murky waters?
Yeah.
And you could just speak on Navy and Marine Corps on this one. Like, hey, is it, we have honor, courage, and commitment, and those things tie very well to our spirituality. Right. So you should probably join, right? That kind of thing.
I don't know. I don't know if that's the truth, right? But I think it goes back to what we talked about before. If whatever you do in life is for that higher power, that's the lens at which you look at it through. In fact, I was dealing with a Marine the other day who's going through some things, got himself into some trouble. He's doing some remedial tasks, right? He's sweeping floors and, doing a lot of cleaning and things that he views as beneath him. And so, before we got into, what got you into that mess? I asked him, who are you doing it for? And, for him, it was the corporal, whoever ordered him to do it.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay. But is there something else you believe in life? Is there a moral or a value that drives you to do whatever you're doing with dignity and respect and to the best of your abilities? And he said, well, yeah, I'm a Christian. I believe in God and things like that. I'm like, so is what you're doing, sweeping that floor, is it really for that corporal? Or is it for a purpose much higher? Are you doing that for God? And if you're not sweeping that floor to the best of your ability, who are you letting down, the corporal or your God? If everything we do is for the glory of God and for the kingdom of God, maybe you should sweep that floor even better. And yeah, he wasn't so happy about that because I kind of had him in a trap, right?
Yeah.
But it's the truth. If we claim to believe in a higher power and we do have faith in God, everything we do should be done through that lens. Just as Jesus said, the meek shall inherit the earth. And what he was doing is a very meek task. Meekness meaning not weak or feeble, but powerless. In that moment, his power had been taken away because he got himself in trouble and he's being ordered to do these things he thought were beneath him. But if you looked at it through that lens, if I'm sweeping these floors to the best of my ability and I'm making that corner or that space look tip top, what does that say about my character and about my faith and about who I'm really serving?
Ouch.
So
that's really good. You should probably be more present during Mass than NJPs. Then we won't have to worry about what their task assigned. But here, question, and there's two there. I'll do the first one. You said it doesn't really. You didn't say it, but I what you told me, I kind of interpreted in my way of it doesn't necessarily align with values in military organizations. Spirituality doesn't, but because you serve a higher power, it kind of that gets pushed. And you'll do everything to the best of your ability to serve, for the glory of God. Why doesn't it necessarily jive all the time?
Well, I think it does if you look at it the right way. I mean, honor, courage, commitment, you would find all those in any holy scripture, right? Those values are all there to honor God, to have moral and physical courage, and to be committed to something greater than yourself. But for some people who aren't ready to believe in God or they feel betrayed by religion, that's still a very spiritual concept. So I think they're on the same level. Even if let's say the Marine Corps is your form of spirituality, living by honor, courage, and commitment, if you're truly doing that, it's making you a better person. But I don't know that everybody looks at it that way. We're so used to hearing those things. I don't think we're taught that those are actual values that define our character. And just as the battalion CO said not too long ago in a all hands call, the how does he put it? It came from the anatomy of courage. The character we display in peacetime demonstrates the courage we show in combat. So if we're living by those things while in garrison and as we enter the military, when we're actually out there and our courage is put to the test, it defines who we are. And I don't think a religion's much different. There's a religion to the Marine Corps and the Navy, and if people looked at it that way, like this is the framework for my morals, values, and character, we would all be better service members because they're really good values.
Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah,
I think we're a little bit on the same page. There's no really disagreement here. I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah,
maybe because we're over the hill in terms of age, right? Mm-hmm. Let's bring that down to this generation.
Okay.
I don't think that this generation, and I could be wrong, not generally speaking, right? I use the example. I got really upset 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Like super, my blood was boiling, right? There's a couple sailors in mast. And I like how they do it. They're a position of attention, like ready for it, right? Mm-hmm. I love it. Marines need to be doing that too. Position of attention, ready for it to walk into the man.
Yeah.
But they were smiling, and it just got my blood boiling. And it wasn't not like I hated the fact they were smiling. I just passionately didn't like what they were doing at the position of attention. Maybe it was kind of the PTSD of drill instructor duty, but I don't think it was. I think it was. I was really royally upset because why are you laughing?
Yeah.
When you're coming into this situation that's not only affecting you but everybody else around you. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that, and again this is my opinion, but generally speaking, I don't think that they take in consideration that piece and then make a decision. They just kind of self this. I'm going to do this because I want to do this. It has nothing to do with anybody else, but just I.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the things that we see here is they're getting in trouble because their fleshly desires, but they don't really take a look at the big picture. And that's maybe because of the age. But even then, when I was 21, 22, yeah, I still had trouble with it. But I was married, had 2 kids, so my obligations and decision-making were different than a normal 22-year-old.
Yeah.
Why isn't that they're looking at the big picture at this young age?
Well, I can guarantee you they didn't come out of mass laughing and smiling. So maybe that was part of it, right? Maybe that's part of the character development. Like, hey, this is a joke until you stand in front of the man and you realize, oh, this isn't a joke. I have character flaws. And when NJP is done properly, I think in the way I think the CO does it, and he does it very well, is it teaches them like, hey, repentance, change. Here's your chance to change and take these character flaws and turn it into a character strength. Learn from this, right? And I think we were all knuckleheads at that age, and we all made mistakes, even though some of us didn't stand before the CO because we got away with whatever we did. It's a learning opportunity. And that's what I try to help them see. Like, hey, you can look at this as a failure, or you can look at it as a chance to turn your life around, to be a better Marine or sailor, and not embarrass yourself or the cloth that you wear, or betray your morals and values you were raised to have.
That's good. Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Being tucked away in this corner, how has that affected your mental state? Because this is a nice little cave you got going on here.
Yeah. How does it affect my mental state?
Is there a lot of time to think to your own, what is that? What's that word I'm looking for? So you're trying to praise, and all of a sudden your mind starts telling you different things because you're here in quiet and silence.
No, I mean, a lot of times I'm not in quiet and silence. I'm in the chaos of others' minds, right?
Well, okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's a good thing to bring up, because I think the quiet is problematic for most service members, including me as a chaplain. Chaos, and I come from a background of chaos. Is why a lot of us join the military. We're looking for normalcy or structure, only to get here and they give us normalcy and structure, and that's intimidating to us. We'd rather be in the chaos, right?
Oh.
And Marines say that all the time. I don't want to be in garrison. I want to be fighting war. That's what I joined to do. I'm like, but you have to learn how to live in quiet too. But that's where really people struggle with all the moral injury and the trauma, is you can take a Marine and put them in a firefight all day long, and they're going to thrive, and they're going to operate. All that muscle memory is going to come to action. But you put them in a quiet room in a chair by themselves for 30 minutes, and they'll start to unravel because there's no more chaos. They have to deal with the thoughts. They have to deal with the moral transgressions.
That's deep.
I would say, yeah, even for me, a quiet room sometimes can be very intimidating. I'd rather be running into the fire, dealing with other people's chaos, because it's a distraction.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Give me a minute. I got to soak that in, because I mean that resonates with me, because I know we spoke on a couple weeks back. I'm like these drives are quiet, and feeling is very deceptive, right? It says, what is it? I can't think of the verse. Lean not on your own understanding, but I can't even say it anymore. But I'm sure you know the verse is, my feelings are very deceptive. And I say, like, man, I feel far from grace in these silent situations. But you saying it's just unraveling. It's actually a good thing that you need to unravel, because you got to figure out how you truly tick and who you really are.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think about Jesus, he's sitting there, he's with the disciples in the storm, right? And the storm's raging, the disciples, and Jesus is asleep and on the aft end of the boat, just in the middle of chaos. He's in the quiet, and he's fine, because Jesus knew how to operate in the storms of life. He was able to find the eye of the storm, so to speak. So he's at peace, perfectly fine, asleep, and the disciples are losing their minds, and they wake him up like, Jesus, things are getting bad. What should we do? And Jesus gets up and he basically says, be still. And then things calm down. That's a message for us, right? Like,
Oh boy.
be still. Even in the storm, you have to find a place where you can calm down, be still, and gather your emotions and figure out, who's really in control here. Is it you? We're not in control of much, right? Except for how we respond to the storm. And that's where the faith piece comes in. Is the only thing I'm in control of here is really reaching out to God and asking God to petition things on my behalf or to calm things on my behalf.
That's good. Be still.
Yeah.
So this quiet place is good. It's
Well, outside the beeping of
there's obviously construction happening. I'm sure that'll be edited out here.
Yeah.
But that's good because a lot of people think I think because they don't understand the unraveling of life in those quiet moments.
Yeah.
That's pretty profound because a lot of people think, man, I can't hear nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm left to my own thought,
Yeah.
my own thought process. And my own thought process is wicked in itself already, not even to include spirituality, but it's wicked already. So that could be a bad onion to peel already in terms of PTSD, depression, anxieties, on the far right, suicide.
Yeah.
That's crazy because if you left your own thoughts, who knows what'll happen?
Yeah, I mean, that's why TikTok, YouTube Shorts, the Facebook stuff, like all that stuff's so powerful because it allows us to remain in the chaos. And whenever a thought creeps in, we can just scroll. We'd rather have, images and videos and thoughts of other people when we're sitting here doing a podcast, right? We'd rather listen to those things than to deal with our own inner happenings. But how many people will go through life just scrolling? All of us probably will if we can. But the problem is at some point in time, you have to sit in that quiet space. What happens when the phone battery dies or, the power's out? People lose their minds. They don't know what to do. But if we incorporate that as a spiritual fitness item, just as we would, something with physical fitness, doing push-ups for upper body strength. Marines are great at doing pull-ups and things like that. But how many hours do they spend on spiritual fitness, right? If you just worked your upper body out and never worked out your legs, which a lot of Marines are kind of guilty of, what happens?
Look like a chicken leg.
You end up like Incredible Hulk up top, and you have,
Ronnie Coleman legs after the bad incident.
Little bitty, skinny legs. And I'm the opposite because I love to run more than I do upper body. So I'm more developed on the other end. I have raptor arms and a huge lower body. But we don't look at spirituality the same way. Are we spiritually kind of emaciated? And how often do we exercise our spirituality? Do we sit in those quiet places to work on that spiritual strength? A lot of us never do. And then we wonder why we're struggling when life gets hard. Well, we got those skinny legs and they're not really supporting us spiritually, right?
That's good. That's good. If you just tuned in, I mean, just listen to the last 5 minutes. It's great. Spiritual development. I think a lot of people correlate physical development, physically fit, into their mental fitness. Because if you're physically fit, well, you can mentally handle stress. You'll be fine. And they really put spirituality on the back burner, but that's just another piece of mental fitness. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, physical fitness has a lot to do with mental toughness and spiritual toughness, right? We know that being in a warfighting organization, but the opposite is the same. What happens if you're relying upon your physical fitness and then you lose a limb or you get injured and you can't work out? And you're kind of sedentary, right? Well, you have to sit in the quiet. And that's where that spiritual fitness comes in handy. Because you're used to sitting in that quiet space. You're not intimidated by it. You're okay with it. It's actually a good thing.
Wow.
So
I need some more quiet time.
We all do in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. This is it's true. It's a lot. Actually, you know what? Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
One saver. I know that you have a busy schedule being a chaplain, so I don't want to take too much of your time. But one last save round, if you can give anybody sound wisdom, which I think you can, but if you had one last thing to say to save the one or inspire the one, what would it be right now?
I would say find your path, your spiritual path, whatever that may be. For me, it's obviously Christianity. I think for you the same. But if that's not your thing, find your path. I mean, if you look at, we'll use the Marine Corps as an example, you look at all the people that we uphold as our heroes, right? Chesty Puller. Every Marine knows who Chesty is. There's a picture of Chesty in every gym, every office. There's memes everywhere. But he was a quiet person in terms of devotion and faith. But he was open about it sometimes. I don't know if you've ever heard this story, but he had a fondness for Catholic chaplains in World War II in the Pacific. And the reason why is because he said they always went forward with their Marines. They were always out there in the fight, always present with them, suffering with them, taking care of the ones who were injured and dying, right? And he was Episcopalian or Episcopal, and he had a dislike for Protestant chaplains because he said they weren't willing to do that their spiritual path prohibited them from going out and fighting the Marines. In fact, there was a Protestant minister or chaplain who came to Chesty and complained that the Catholic chaplains were kind of cherry-picking all of the Marines to go to their services. And he's like, well, why do you think that is? Maybe if you're willing to go forward with the men, with the Marines, and be with them, you wouldn't have this problem.
Oh, man.
And so he ended up, and this was in New Guinea, I think, he ended up seeing this chaplain again who he stayed behind. He didn't go out with his Marines. And he's like, you remember that conversation we had about you being afraid of the Catholic chaplain stealing all your people? I wonder why that is. And he kind of gave him a hard time. He's like, this is the reason why, because you're not where you're supposed to be. In terms of like choosing your path, I think as chaplains, that's even important for us because some people may choose a path where they're going to stay behind and they're not going to be out there and they're not going to suffer with their people. And I think all of us are inclined to do that. None of us likes to suffer. But no matter what you're doing, even if you're a chaplain, I think if you choose the pathway of suffering to be with your people, your Marines, your sailors, wherever they are, and live like them and be with them and take care of them, whether you're a PFC or the CO, that puts us all on the same page, that it's shared suffering. But you also have to have a pathway to deal with that suffering in your own way. I think there needs to be that collective effort, the common good, but there also has to be that individual relationship with a higher power or a spiritual path, because at the end of this life, we can't take everybody with us. We cross that bridge alone. And whatever we believe is either going to bring us a sense of peace or it's going to be a hard thing for us. So that would be my one thing, is find your path and be okay with it, because at some point in time we all have to cross that bridge called death. It's a big part of life. And that's really where it matters the most, is start developing it now so you don't get to that point. And as a hospice chaplain, I saw that. I saw the two different pathways, people who had spent a lifetime devoted to their faith or to their beliefs. It brought them a great sense of peace for the most part. And then people who are actually struggling to figure it out towards the end of their life, it was a much different experience for those people.
Wow.
So I don't know if I think I went down a rabbit trail.
No, that's really good. I mean, that's a good way to end it. It's just you need to find
Chesty Puller. It's always a good.
Yeah, one for Chesty. Hey, there it is, right there, in memory of.
But maybe that's why he was so courageous and he was able to do the things he did, because he knew what he believed in. He wasn't trying to figure out that aspect of himself.
Yeah,
that was one less thing he had to worry about.
He was selfless. Yeah. That's good.
Well, it depends on who worked for him, right?
Yeah, right. That's true. That's good. But even then, I mean, that's a challenge in itself. Is just find your purpose and don't lose it.
Yeah,
because we could probably keep going and losing purpose once you transition.
Yeah. From
service to just regular old Smo Joe civilian, and a lot of service members lose purpose because they've lost their brothers and sisters in arms.
Or you could say hope, too.
Oh?
Yeah.
Huh.
Hope is, if you ever read Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning, I think that's the title of it. He went through concentration camps and became a psychotherapist after he survived all that. And basically the thesis of what he's saying there is the difference between people who survived and those who didn't was a thing called hope, believing in something more than themselves, having something that they relied upon. And he said that was the biggest defining factor of people who survived, is they never lost their hope.
I'm about to read, and this is how you end it. There's no atheists in foxholes.
Yeah.
That's crazy. How you started it. And
there might be one or two out there,
yeah.
but
there is, because I'm sure I've had this conversation with close Marines, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, well, you're not in that predicament right now, but if you were, you'd be praying to somebody.
That's the beautiful thing of this nation, exercise of free religion.
Yeah.
But I hope people find hope in whatever it is they believe.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Thank you again. Thank you, sir. Chaplain Shawn Redmon. Where can they reach you if they have some more questions and they find you a inspirational times, saved a life times, whatever it is that they're looking for at the time?
Yeah.
How can they reach you? Do you have social media handles? Do you have anywhere LinkedIn, anything?
No, I broke up with social media a while ago just because it was chaos. It was distraction in my life. It kept me from the quiet time. I do have Facebook, but it's usually deactivated unless I need to get on Facebook Marketplace and buy something. Right? Or connect with an old veteran friend. Yeah. I do have Facebook Messenger.
Okay.
But I think you have to be a friend of mine to access me there. But I'll give I have a personal email people can email me at. It's my spam email, so I'm not worried about any of that happening. But it is REV, V as in Victor, like Rev, and then my last name REDMON 1 at hotmail.com. It's Hotmail. It's old.
That's how you know you're old, sir.
Yeah.
You're aging yourself right now. Say that again one more time.
So Rev as in Reverend, right? REV, and then my last name REDMON 1 at hotmail.com.
That's it.
All the kids in the stores laugh at me when they hear Hotmail. So
I'm laughing now. I only know one other person, Chief Officer 5, Pierce. He's out in headquarters Marine Corps. Hotmail. I'm like, what are you doing here? You need to upgrade to at least a Gmail. Everybody has Gmail now.
Yeah, well, I have a Gmail, but I use that for like business stuff. So.
Fair. That's fair. But hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is Chaps Redmon. You got his email handle, not social media, because he broke up with her a long time ago. I'm sure she's knocking at the door. She wants you back eventually.
I've never had an Instagram account, Snapchat, any of that stuff. The only thing I ever had was Facebook. Mm-hmm. And that's when you were required to have a college email address. This is when Facebook first started, right? You had to have that .edu email address to even have Facebook.
Wow.
So that's the only thing I've ever had, and I'm probably a better person not being distracted by all that.
That's good. Hey, take some time, be still, and know that I am God, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right.
Not me, but that's what he's telling you. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Pit Talk, pulling pits and opinions with your host, Gunny G, and the special guest, Chaplain Redmon. If you don't follow, like or subscribe, subscribe everywhere you get social media, podcast, and basically most social media platforms. One man, a fighting hole. Let me know what you think, and then email Chaps Redmon. He's available. That's what he's for.
Yeah.
Work him till the last day.
And just know all these opinions stated today are only solely Lieutenant Shawn P. Redmon, United States Navy Chaplain Corps. It's not the opinion of the Navy or the Chaplain Corps. They're all mine.
You're good. Sir. The disclaimer's already at the front, at the end of it.
Yeah.
You'll be all right. But thank you for your time again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Pit Talk, pulling pits and opinions with your host, Gunny G. We out.
Chaps out.
Pit Talk is a podcast featuring active service members who discuss their thoughts and opinions on various issues surrounding military life, current events, and history. The statements heard here are the opinions of its members and guests. These do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense and are not endorsed or sponsored in any way. Listener, viewer discretion advised.